Join me today as I make a delicious beet juice recipe. I'm gonna clean out my refrigerator to do so. Hi everybody, welcome back to Clean Eating Kitchen. I'm Carrie and this is my channel where I share easy, healthy recipes and tips to help you feel your best. And today we're gonna talk about everything juicing. I'm gonna show you my beet juice recipe, and then I'm going to cover some frequently asked questions I get about juicing. So as I mentioned, I'm cleaning out my refrigerator to make this beet juice. And that's because I find beets to be extremely versatile in terms of juicing. You can add really any fruit or vegetable almost, and it will taste really good. I particularly like beets, apples, ginger, lemon. I think those go really well together. Also carrots. And then today I just wanted to use up really all the extra fruit and vegetables that I had in my refrigerator. So I also added celery, parsley. I had some kiwis that really needed to be used up, some cucumber. These are all mild tasting vegetables that go really well with the beets. And I think it also works really well if you don't love beet juice. A lot of people don't. I happen to like the taste very much, but a lot of people don't, and so it's nice to add these other flavors. I also added some ginger. So I'm going to show you how I got everything prepped up, and then I just put it in my juicer, and it ended up being so delicious. One of the frequently asked questions that I'll answer in just a minute is about straining the juice after you put it through the juicer. I'll say why I do that and when. And then I'm also going to talk about some of the benefits and drawbacks to juicing, and I will talk about my favorite juice as well as the worst tasting juice I have ever made. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments and I'll answer them in a future video. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe. So this beet juice recipe turned out really delicious. I did strain it, and I'll just go ahead and answer why I strain. I don't always strain my juice after making it, but I do find sometimes there are pieces of fiber that don't get strained out in the juicing process, and that's what juicing is separating the fiber from the juice. And I find sometimes if I don't strain it, it will give me an upset tummy. And so if you have a sensitive tummy, it can be nice to strain the juice. And the way I do that is I just pour the juice through a fine mesh strainer. It can be a little messy, but I do find it makes it really smooth, really easy to digest. So again, if you have a sensitive tummy or sensitive digestive system, you might try straining it. And that kind of goes into one of the most common questions I get all the time about juicing, because I do have quite a few juicing videos on my channel, and that is why juice? Aren't you making something healthy, like a whole fruit or vegetable, unhealthy by removing the fiber? And technically, of course, fiber is really important for our health, but sometimes there are instances or people who are sensitive to fiber, or maybe you just want like a really concentrated source of nutrients, and that's where juicing comes in. So it doesn't replace smoothies or eating vegetables in their whole form or cooked where you get the fiber. It's just kind of like something extra. So juicing, for some people do it every day as just a way to really, I like to think of it as bathing the cells in nutrients. So I've been doing it since probably around 2010. So I've been juicing for quite a while. And that's the way I think about it, is just like an extra way to get an extra amount of nutrition. And I personally find that it really helps give me a boost in my immune system. I rarely get sick, knock on wood. And as I was saying, I find juicing to be a really great, healthy part of my balanced diet. So some of the other questions I get, actually particularly related to beet juice, because I have shared quite a few beet juice recipes on my channel. I always get asked, do you juice the beets raw or cooked? And you always want to juice them raw. I think if you tried to juice them cooked, it would just turn into mush. So yes, you definitely want to scrub the beets well. I usually cut off the ends. You can juice the beet greens, definitely, if you can. I usually don't because they're really high in oxalates, and I think beets are too, but just to reduce that. And also I find the greens to be bitter, so I usually just juice beets, the raw beets, and you can juice any kind of raw beets. The red ones, golden ones, there's striped ones, so any type. Another common question I get is about the drawbacks of juicing. I kind of talked about the benefits. The drawbacks, I would say, it can be costly because you go through a lot of produce just to get kind of a small amount of juice. And so whereas it might take you, let's say if you bought a bunch of produce to make a salad, that would probably last you a few days, whereas you could put all those ingredients through a juicer and you would get, you know, enough juice just for one day. So it definitely can be expensive. I try to buy my produce in bulk, so I will often buy celery and fruits from Costco or stores like that. I will also buy produce at my local farmer's market, and then I will buy maybe the produce that's discounted because it's bruised or maybe it's a little bit overripe. But things like that are great for juicing. You don't want to juice anything rotten or anything with mildew, because that is not safe. You can get sick. But if stuff is overripe or maybe it's a little bruised and you can just cut off the bruised part and then juice the rest of it, that can be a way to save money. But I would say that is probably the biggest drawback, is just that the expense of it. And then of course a juicer, a really nice juicer, could set you back several $100s. I'll link to two of my favorite juicers right now, and one is I want to say it's less than $100, and then the other one is more of a high-end purchase, several $100s, but it will last you for decades. So let's talk about my favorite juice, and anything that has apple or pear, because I have a sweet tooth. So I also I like any vegetables that don't have any bitterness. So anything with cucumber. I do like celery juice. I like to mix it with lime, but a lot of people don't like it, but I don't find it to be bitter, and so I like celery juice. I love anything with ginger, and so those are probably my favorites. Again, I do like carrot juice, or adding carrots to my juice, because it adds natural sweetness. And then I already mentioned apples, and maybe, I don't know if you know this, but red apples tend to be higher in natural sugars. So if you're trying to watch even your natural sugar intake, go for green apples because they're a little bit less sweet. As far as the worst juice, I would have to say is cabbage juice. I do have a video on cabbage juice because it's very therapeutic. It has some research around helping with gastritis or stomach inflammation or digestive system inflammation, but it tastes pretty terrible. I could add a little bit of cabbage with other produce and it won't be quite as bad, but it is a very strong flavor. So that would probably be my least favorite juice, or really anything with that's bitter, like maybe broccoli. But yeah, cabbage is very intense. If you drink cabbage, then cabbage juice, kudos to you, because I can't do it. It's pretty bad. I often get questions about when you should drink juice and how much to drink. I usually, at least one person will always ask me that when I post a juicing recipe, and I can't answer that because it's very individual. I don't know, what health conditions you're treating or symptoms you're having, and also, a lot can depend on your own personal digestive system. Again, like I said, some people are sensitive. So I would say if you're a beginner, to start with just a little bit, maybe a few ounces. And I've heard different people say, like on an empty stomach or before breakfast. I don't think that really matters too much. I will often drink juice almost like a snack, and it kind of goes back to that idea of what I was saying about bathing your cells in nutrients. The idea that if you don't have I guess on more of like an empty stomach, but then there's also the thinking of if you had juice with a meal, that if you have some fats with the meal, the fats might help you absorb some of those nutrients, especially the fat soluble nutrients. But again, I think you can just see what works best for you. A lot of people also want to know about juice fasting, and that's not really something that I promote, because I just really try to promote like more of a balanced approach to nutrition. I am a nutritionist, but so juice fasting is getting more into like that's more of like a medical situation that where you need to be supervised by somebody, just to make sure you're getting everything you need and you're not I don't know, becoming malnourished or not developing unhealthy patterns, that kind of thing. So I'll leave that to you to do your own research on. And then a lot of people ask me about, well, they'll like get confused between juicing and making smoothies, where in my mind a smoothie is blended and you're not removing anything. So it's like you put everything in a container and blend it all up. And then a juice is you're extracting the fiber and you're leaving the juice. So I will often get comments on my juices and people will say, oh, well, I would make it into a blended drink and drink the whole thing. And you can totally do that. But that's not a juice. That is a smoothie. And you're going to find a smoothie to be a lot more filling because you're going to have all that fiber. So that's probably just another benefit of juice, is that it tends to be lower in calories than smoothies, but with just so much nutrition, so many micronutrients, so many antioxidants, all the great things that you get from fresh fruits and vegetables. And then I would say the last frequently asked question I get about juicing is, what are the best ingredients to use for juicing, and how do you get the most bang for your buck? And I think, like, I try to choose a balance of water-rich vegetables and then dense vegetables. So then, because if you, let's say, just put only beets into a juicer, you would not get much juice. It would just be very, very concentrated, because beets are such a dense vegetable. They just don't have a lot of water. So that's why I like to pair it with something like a cucumber or celery, because those are very water rich. And so I just always kind of keep that in mind when I'm planning for a juice recipe. You can always just include the basics, like something like lemon or lime adds brightness, something like ginger adds tanginess, and then the water rich and then the dense. You just kind of have to play with combinations like that until you find your favorites. And then I'm always looking for produce that's not too expensive. As I mentioned, you know, something like apples, especially during apple season, tend to be budget friendly. And I guess one more question I get is about organic. Do you need to use only organic produce when you're juicing? And that's really personal preference and budget. I will try to buy organic, but if I go to the farmer's market, then the organic is not always available, but then I'll try to find a vendor who doesn't use pesticides. Maybe they use some fertilizers, some synthetic fertilizers, but they don't spray pesticides on their produce. I think that's more important than finding the certified organic. If you just go to a regular grocery store, usually you only have the choice of conventional or organic. And so then it's just going to, like I said, be up to you and your budget. So I hope that shed some light on juicing, whether you're new to juicing or you just want to do it more often. As I mentioned, I'll put my 2 recommended juicers in the description. I'm also going to link to a video I did not that long ago, but it was about juicing for beginners, and I also showed some great beginner recipes. So be sure to check that video out, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.